Baumbach is one of those filmmakers who's kind of his own genre. I'm not an expert on the guy, but based on the few of his movies that I've seen and on his reputation, I would say that his genre is smart, acerbic, talky, character-driven comedy dramas that aren't so much built around big plot events, so much as around interpersonal relationships and internal character struggles. Over Christmas, a relative told me that she'd watched Marriage Story and that nothing happens. I disagree, but at the same time, depending on what you're expecting or what you're used to, Noah Baumbach's movies can feel like that. Anecdotally, the first movie of his that I saw was Frances Ha, probably his most acclaimed movie outside of Marriage Story. And when I first saw it 6 or 7 years ago, I remember liking it okay, but kind of having similar complaints, that not much happens. However, I happened to rewatch Frances Ha over Christmas, and I don't know if I've gotten used to a certain kind of movie in the last 7 years, or if my tastes have changed, or if my newfound affinity for the work of star and co-writer Greta Gerwig has anything to do with it. But wow, I can't believe there's ever a time where I didn't love Frances Ha, because I sure as shit love it now. It's delightful. I offer that anecdote and primer on Noah Baumbach's movies because, for obvious reasons, this will be his most seen movie ever, by a very, very, very large margin. While he certainly has his fans, ardent fans, he just makes the kind of movies that don't really get wide releases, and they're lucky if they make $10 million in their limited box office runs. And now he has a movie on Netflix that Netflix is pushing hard for awards consideration, and features two of the biggest, most recognizable stars on the planet. People who have no idea who Noah Baumbach is, and may not know what to expect, are gonna put this movie on, because they're gonna fire up Netflix and, oh look, there's Kylo Ren and Black Widow, what's this? The other reason I bring up Baumbach himself is because I'm not sure you can get a full appreciation of Marriage Story without knowing a little bit about the guy who made it. He hasn't been shy about the fact that one of his earlier movies, The Squid and the Whale, also about divorce, was semi-autobiographical, about how he experienced his parents' divorce. Similarly, one of the two leads in Marriage Story is a theater director based in New York with shaggy black hair, married to a theater actress and frequent collaborator, and they go through a pretty ugly divorce. And Noah Baumbach is a movie director based in New York with shaggy black hair and was married to a movie actress and frequent collaborator, and 10 years ago they went through an unpleasant public divorce. I don't really want to go any deeper than that into Noah Baumbach's personal life because frankly it's none of my business. I just want to note those parallels because I think it enriches the text. Just like knowing that Michael Keaton played Batman decades ago enriches the text of his character in Birdman, and knowing that Mickey Rourke was a big star in the 80s but had a pretty tumultuous 1990s enriches the text of his character in The Wrestler. To reiterate, I'm not really interested in sharing the salacious details of celebrity relationships and the dissolution thereof. I'm only interested in sharing information that might enrich the text of Marriage Story. So, what is the text of Marriage Story? Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson play Charlie and Nicole respectively, and at the start of the movie, they are actively in the process of separating. And it's relatively amicable. They're still living in the same apartment. They agree that they don't need lawyers because they can just split everything. They're planning to get apartments near each other to make it easy on their young son Henry. Yada yada yada, we all want the same things, let's not make this harder than it needs to be. As mentioned, Charlie is an acclaimed theater director. He gets a MacArthur Genius Grant early in the movie. Nicole is an acclaimed theater actress, and they're based in New York, though Nicole is about to head to Los Angeles for a short spell to film a TV pilot, which may not be as intellectually ambitious as the theater work she'd been doing in New York. While in LA, we learn that Nicole's mom and sister live there, and that she and Charlie had always planned to live in LA at some point, but they just never got around to relocating. Kind of on a whim, Nicole decides to meet with an LA divorce lawyer, played by Laura Dern, congrats, and this and other buried contempts kind of spill out of her in a really, really great tearful monologue from Scarlett Johansson.
I got smaller. I realized I didn't ever really come alive for myself. I was just feeding his aliveness.
From there, the separation escalates. Nicole has to serve Charlie divorce papers, and he has to find a divorce lawyer, and suddenly she wants to live in LA with their son, and Charlie's left wondering what happened to their New York family. That takes you mostly through Act 1, and from there, the movie is a series of escalations. No one escalation seems that bad in a vacuum, but they add up, and eventually two people who were once cordial just explode on each other. At the very least, the movie's a good look at how fucked up the divorce process is, how quickly it escalates, and how it gamifies an already emotionally taxing process and makes it an even more emotionally taxing process in addition to a financially taxing process. This is all encapsulated by a great, if not hard to watch, courtroom scene where Laura Dern and Ray Liotta, playing the lawyers for Nicole and Charlie respectively, spar viciously before a judge, and innocuous things that we've seen Nicole and Charlie do or say up to that point are weaponized against them in a really barbed, ugly way.
On a recent visit to Los Angeles, the car seat, which he had assured Nicole had been professionally installed, was clearly not even belted in. It was just sitting in the back seat.
You have to buckle in the car seat. It's the law.
During the sequence, you may notice that cinematographer Robbie Ryan shoots a lot of low angles. And you may remember he did something similar in The Favorite last year, for which he was Oscar nominated. And while The Favorite is a much flashier movie than Marriage Story, and Yorgos Lanthimos is a much flashier director than Noah Baumbach, I still think Robbie Ryan does really great work shooting Marriage Story, particularly because it's mostly a people in rooms talking movie. Those aren't always easy to make look good, but he makes this look really good. I like the use of profile shots where Nicole and Charlie are facing opposite directions, like they're going head to head. And I like this shot of them on the subway. Again, sort of squaring off, but also with a lot of meaningful empty space between them, plus vertical lines separating them in the frame. Also, the movie's like overly lit. I'm thinking specifically of Nicole's crying monologue in Act 1 and their balls out, everything in the kitchen sink blow-up fight in Act 3. Both are not only in broad daylight, but also so brightly lit that there's not really any shadows. And it doesn't make the scene look warm, it makes it look austere. There's no shadows for the actors, or more importantly, the characters to hide in. They're just exposed and vulnerable in the bright light. Speaking of which, the performances are like holy shit good across the board. I think Adam Driver is one of the most interesting actors working today, and he's really thrown heat in this one. I guess I've never really been on board the ScarJo train. Nothing against her. I've never thought she was bad in anything. She just like never really dazzled me before this, but damn, she dazzled me in this. Laura Dern's gonna win an Oscar for this, even if she is kind of just playing a version of her character from Big Little Lies. I got no problem with that. Any Laura Dern is good Laura Dern. And hey, Alan Alda and Ray Liotta are here, doing exactly what you want from Alan Alda and Ray Liotta. Soft and warm and hard and abrasive, respectively. And when talking about the performances, it's worth noting that performance is a running theme of the movie. Whether you're performing for a judge, or performing for a social worker, or performing for your partner mid-separation. Outside of Laura Dern, I think the only other real Oscar possibility for this is an original screenplay, and tough beat for Noah Baumbach that Quentin's in the category this year. But regardless, it's a really great script. Mature, nuanced, funny, and really sad. The movie opens in voiceover montages with Charlie listing what he loves about Nicole and Nicole listing what she loves about Charlie. And what we immediately learn is that this is an exercise from their mediator at the start of the separation process. As he says, it's good to begin from a positive place and to keep those things in mind to keep the process from getting too ugly. So much for that, as it turns out. But I think this is also a super effective introduction to the characters and their relationship for us, the audience. To me, it really raises the stakes. From the word jump, you don't see these as two people who were a disaster together and are better off apart. You know, the opposite. You see that they really loved each other once, and they bettered each other and were good for each other. It gives us a real rooting interest in their relationship. We want them to figure it out, even if they're doomed not to. And because of that opening and that immediate rooting interest, when they're having these civil conversations about the logistics of their separation at the start of the movie, the conversation feels so precarious and high stakes. Every word they say to each other feels loaded and meaningful, because we know for a fact that there are strong feelings there. And it's precarious because they don't want to hurt each other, even though that's a real possibility. To prove this point, one of the first conversations they have, it's innocuous enough, it's not really about anything meaningful, and yet, as soon as Nicole walks away from Charlie and turns the corner, she bursts into silent tears. And this early conversation, where they're precariously tiptoeing around each other's feelings, is heavily contrasted by their blow-up fight in Act 3. That fight is more the fight you have when you no longer care about the other person's feelings, so you just say, fuck it, and pull out every resentment and terrible thought you've ever had about the other person and just carelessly throw it out there, whether you actually mean it or not. I also really appreciate that the movie doesn't really take sides, instead opting for more nuance, where both Charlie and Nicole are sympathetic and unsympathetic in their own ways. I know some people see it more as Charlie's story than Nicole's story, and while he does get more screen time, I think that's more a result of the movie focusing on who's ever in crisis at a given moment. Like, Nicole's the focus of Act 1 because that's when she's in crisis, and Charlie's the focus of Acts 2 and 3, for the most part, because that's when he's in crisis. Charlie's more of a mess without Nicole than vice versa. What's interesting is I watched this with my wife, and we were talking about it afterwards, and she was kind of softly defending Nicole's actions throughout the movie, and I found myself softly defending Charlie's actions throughout the movie. Because, they both share blame. They're both instigator and victim to varying degrees. Again, nuance. I also told my wife that I would mention one of her smart observations about the movie, so here that is. In Act 1, when Nicole is filming her pilot in LA, she tells one of the producers that her character needs to be shown to be a good mother, otherwise she'll be unsympathetic to the audience. And that is both meta-commentary for how we see Nicole in the coming divorce, and foreshadowing for how Nicole needs to present herself to the judge in the upcoming custody battle. Astute observation from my wife. Speaking of that pilot that Nicole films in LA, I mentioned at the top that Marriage Story is probably at least a little biographical for Noah Baumbach, given his divorce from an actress 10 years ago. But we can't forget about Greta Gerwig. She's acted in 3 of Baumbach's movies and was a co-writer on 2 of those, and they've been romantic partners since 2011. Talented household. So while parts of this movie about divorce were in all likelihood inspired by Noah Baumbach's divorce, you can also see aspects of his relationship with Greta Gerwig. The biggest example being that Nicole goes off to LA to shoot a pilot, and she's self-conscious that Charlie thinks it's a bad, dumb show. And in a scary to think about what if scenario, Greta Gerwig was famously cast as the lead in a How I Met Your Mother spin-off, How I Met Your Dad, in 2014. They shot the pilot, but it wasn't picked up for series. And now we have Lady Bird and Little Women, so maybe this isn't the darkest timeline after all. It's pretty savage that Noah Baumbach decided to call this movie Marriage Story. For most of the year, it was just Untitled Noah Baumbach project for Netflix, and it wasn't until like a month or 2 before it premiered at Venice did we finally get a title. It's a very generic title, by design I imagine, but it's not called Divorce Story, which would have been the literal generic title. It's called Marriage Story, which kind of gives it the feel of like a thesis statement on the institution of marriage, and not a very positive one. But it's not all dreary. Regardless of what Baumbach may or may not think about the institution of marriage, based on his work, he very clearly believes in love. Despite how ugly things get in this movie, it's still a love story. The ending of a love story, but a love story nonetheless. And like so many love stories, it's beautiful and messy and hopeful.